When I was 15, I found out I was the real daughter who got switched at birth. My biological parents had come to school secretly a few times to see me, but the girl who replaced me had fragile health. They couldn't bear to let her know the truth. Since I seemed to be doing fine, they just kept delaying. They only reached out to reunite with me when I turned 25. In front of me, the parents cried their hearts out about their guilt and longing for me. But I just stood there in silence, staring at them. I'm 25 now. I just graduated with a master's, and unless something unexpected happens, I'll get an offer from a big company, or even study for a PhD abroad. With my skills, there isn't a company I couldn't join if I wanted. My future is undoubtedly bright and smooth. I'm way past the age where I need parental care and support. But seeing their red and swollen eyes, I didn't say a word and went home with them. The house was big, the unfamiliar place, and my emotional parents made me uncomfortable. But it was there I saw the one who had taken my place for 25 years. Candy stood behind Ken, looking very nervous. She was thin, unnaturally pale. She seemed so fragile, you felt the urge to protect her. Lucy, this is your brother Ken, and this is Candy. I nodded, saying nothing. I didn't miss the hostility in Ken's eyes. He didn't welcome me. His bond with Candy was stronger than with a sister he'd never met. I get it. Anyone would feel the same. Seeing I was aloof, my mom sighed. Lucy, don't blame Candy. Her poor health was our decision. I'd known about Candy for a while. 10 years ago, Wendy told me I wasn't her biological daughter. Instead of shock, I felt a sense of inevitability. Wendy and Mike were from the countryside, short and often sick. Meanwhile, I was tall and rarely got sick. I didn't resemble them, either in looks or personality. When Wendy realized my reaction wasn't shock, she slapped me a few times. She spent an afternoon angrily venting at me. Through her yelling, I pieced together the truth. I was switched at birth with her biological daughter in the hospital. The mistake was only discovered when the daughter needed blood, due to a sudden illness. The biological couple found me after much searching. Back then, we thought they'd come for me soon. No parent would willingly leave their child. Even Wendy, who often hit and scolded me, wanted her real daughter back, despite her preference for boys. Wendy and I waited for my family to come. I spent an entire summer sitting by the village entrance. Every passerby would tease, waiting for your rich parents? Such an ungrateful kid. But the summer passed with no sign of them. I understood though. It was a long way. Getting from there to the village was too far. I'm really sorry, Lucy. I didn't mean to take your life. Go ahead, hit me, let your anger out. Candy came up to me, pleading for forgiveness. Before I could respond, Kim pulled her away. It's not your fault you were switched. You don't need to apologize to anyone, sis. Her tears fell one by one, fixated on me, as if she wouldn't rest without my forgiveness. Nearby, my biological mom cried too, her heart aching. Dad sighed, staying silent. They waited for me to respond, hoping I'd smile and move past this. But some things can never be forgotten. I looked at Candy. If you have time, visit Wendy. She misses you a lot. Ken got angry right away. Lucy, what do you mean? Who doesn't know Wendy's a nasty boy-preferring woman? Why send my sister back there? Seeing his angry face, I couldn't help but laugh. So they knew Wendy was like that. They set me up in a room on the 4th floor. The room wasn't big, but clearly decorated with care. A pink princess bed, pink closet, and pink curtains. It matched the dream home I wrote about in an essay at 15. I forgot what made me write about a pink princess room back then. But I know that dream vanished long ago. Mom watched me from the doorway, her eyes hopeful and eager. I knew she wanted to see me excited or surprised, but I couldn't fake it. I took down the curtains and sheets, folded them, and put them away. Lucy, didn't you love pink? Not for a long time, I replied flatly. Mom didn't consider that a 25-year-old woman might not like pink. Even if she did, she wouldn't decorate her room like this. She just wanted to ease her guilt by trying to make up for what I missed. Ken appeared out of nowhere. My actions seemed to irritate him. He grabbed the sheets. Lucy, do you know how long Mom prepared this for? I don't know. Stop acting like we owe you. It's not our fault you were switched. I laughed, asking, then is it mine? Silence fell over the room. Mom sniffled again. Ken looked conflicted. I wasn't what they imagined. They thought I'd yearn for their love, that any gesture of pity would make me grateful. Finding out otherwise, they were frustrated. I picked up the sheets, hinting they should leave. That night, I stayed in the house I had dreamed of for so long but couldn't sleep. The next morning I got up early. I stayed in, getting my things together for the day. Not long after, there was a knock at the door. Candy was outside. She held a glass of milk, trying to please me with a smile. "Can I come in?" I nodded and casually closed the laptop. Candy put down the milk and openly sized up my room. "Lucy, do you like the decorations I picked for you?" she asked, clearly flaunting her role as the hostess. I stayed silent. Suddenly, Candy burst into laughter. Her face, now smug instead of pale, screamed provocation. She replaced any hint of vulnerability with sheer arrogance. "Lucy, do you know why you were brought back?" she asked, blinking and smiling wider. "I've known about you all along. The first time our parents wanted to bring you back, I took an ice-cold shower all night and ended up in the hospital with a 104-degree fever. The second time I slit my wrists." She showed her wrist, revealing a long, nasty scar. "They held me and said I was their only daughter. After that, they never mentioned bringing you back again." Candy's voice was soft but each word hit hard. I looked up at her and smiled. Slap. In the next moment, I slapped her across the face with all my strength. Candy fell to the floor in shock, her face full of disbelief. Raised like a princess, she'd never been hit before. "You've lost your mind," she yelled. Without a word, I crouched down, grabbed her by the throat, and pushed her toward the window. Half of her body dangled out. Outside, white apricot flowers bloomed, contrasting Candy's ashen face, both beautiful and intense. Her face went from defiant to terrified in a split second. I whispered in her ear, "What do you think will happen if I let go? If you die, will Mom and Dad blame me?" Candy struggled, making muffled noises. Before she passed out, I dragged her back inside and let go. Gasping for air, her face was a mess of tears and snot. She trembled, unable to speak a full sentence. I wiped my hands and downed the milk she brought in. "Get out." After Candy left, no one bothered me all morning, until a servant came to call me for lunch. In the dining room, only my mom and dad were there. As I sat down, Mom kept piling food on my plate. Halfway through the meal, Dad put down his chopsticks. "I heard you and Candy had a fight?" I wiped my mouth and nodded calmly. "Yeah." He seemed taken aback by my reaction but didn't scold me. "You're new here, and Candy's adjusting too. You two should work things out slowly." The table fell silent as we finished eating. Then Mom spoke with a smile. "Lucy, you might not know, but our family and the Nolans have been close forever. When I was pregnant with you, we arranged an engagement for you with their youngest son. Now that you're both grown, it's time to make it official. Since we're busy, Nolan will take you out this afternoon." I dropped my smile. Can't believe they're this eager. Candy doesn't want to marry Nolan, so they remembered their real daughter's engagement promise. That's why they brought me back. I looked at my parents' mixed expressions and said, "I can go through with the engagement." Mom was surprised and quickly said, "Oh honey, it's just for you two to get to know each other." I cut her off. "But I have conditions." They exchanged a glance, relieved. Better conditions than none. But before they could breathe easy, I laid out my terms. "I want a 5% stake in the company." The cold words hit the table, silencing the room. "Mom couldn't believe it." "Lucy, you can't be serious." "I'm dead serious. If you want me to go through with it, I want a stake." Bang! Dad slammed the table. "Replace. You're our daughter. The engagement was always yours." He seemed intimidating when angry, but I wasn't scared. I smiled at him. "Well, on my ID there's only one name, mine." Mom and Dad looked stunned. I was listed alone. Besides blood, I had no ties with them. I pulled out my laptop, showing the details I gathered this morning. At 18, I got into the finance program with the second highest score in the state, went on to secure a graduate position in my junior year, and graduated this year. During grad school, I made 18 profitable investments, with the best one earning 67 times my original investment. Here are my awards and a recommendation letter from my mentor. Plus, the international projects I worked on. Dad watched the video deep in thought. They never bothered to know me before. They thought I'd be a naive, timid, or maybe brash girl, excited about coming home, acting all careful. But they didn't expect me to be composed, unflustered. No pure daffodils bloom in barren soil, only resilient weeds. I'm willing to join the family register and marry for the family's sake, but I want the rightful stake a child should have. For the first time, I saw a hint of admiration in Dad's eyes. He finally saw me for the daughter I am, more accomplished than the son he'd invested so much in. Mom hesitated. Girls shouldn't have shares. I knew my mom too well. She was a product of a business marriage, but was luckier than most. In her mind, girls just need to wear pretty dresses and have a carefree, beautiful life. Dad glared at her, then took me to his study. In there he reviewed my credentials again. I'll give you a chance. Nolan doesn't like arranged marriages. But if you make him willingly go through with it, I'll give you the shares. Charm and social skills are also forms of strength. In the afternoon, I finally met the man I was supposed to marry. Nolan leaned casually against the greenhouse doorframe, listening intently to his mom talk. He wore a hoodie and shorts, looking just like any college guy around campus. A slight smirk played on his lips, giving off a rebellious vibe. Hearing my voice, his mom smiled and introduced us. Nolan, this is Lucy. She'll be with you this afternoon. Nolan checked me out discreetly, then shook my hand after politely speaking to his mom. Let's go, little Miss Lucy. I dodged his hand and gave him a gentle smile. Sorry for the trouble. Nolan drove a car that matched his personality, bold and fiery, just like his orange convertible. I wasn't familiar with the area, so I had no clue where he was taking us. We eventually stopped in a chaotic neighborhood. Nolan parked and smirked. Let me show you the most famous spot. He led me into a private room in a bar. The room was filled with smoke, and I couldn't help but wrinkle my nose. As soon as Nolan walked in, people greeted him. Nolan, you finally made it. Who's this? Nolan glanced at me and scoffed, a new pet. His friends exchanged knowing looks. One even joked, have a seat, Miss Pet. I squinted at Nolan, who sat on the couch, lighting a cigar, ignoring me completely. It was his way of intimidating me into calling off the engagement. How childish. Their expected awkwardness didn't show on my face. I grinned and walked up to Nolan, tilting my head. Nolan, what kind of pet am I? Only then did Nolan look at me full of mockery. After pretending to think, he said canary. Next second, to everyone's shock, I slammed a crystal ashtray onto Nolan's head. Bam! Blood poured from his temple. Nolan collapsed onto the sofa. The ashtray was more effective than I had assumed. The rowdy room fell silent. I crouched to meet his eyes and smiled. How about now? A sharp yell suddenly came from behind me. I turned and saw Candy at the doorway, with a friend in tow. Seems she forgot about our encounter this morning. She pushed me away. Lucy, bullying me is one thing, but how could you do this to Nolan? If I hadn't seen it, Mom and Dad would be in the dark. I'm telling them. Candy was shaking Nolan, who was already woozy. Candy, let go. Candy hesitated and stepped away, glaring at me. Do you know about our family's relationship? If anything happens to Nolan, can you pay for it? I laughed. I do know, and I should thank Nolan. If you hadn't looked down on him for being the second son, I wouldn't be back in the picture. Candy paled, glaring at Nolan, then back at me. She was humiliated and furious. Liar. You took Nolan from me. Oh, do you want him back? Candy fell silent, her intentions clear to everyone, especially Nolan. Enough. Nolan pulled himself off the couch, his hands still bloody. Those intense dark eyes scrutinized me. Are you really Lucy? Seeing his confused eyes, I smiled. Nolan, you've got two choices. Call off the engagement or join me at the hospital for stitches. Hearing this, his face darkened. What if I don't choose? I shrugged and picked up the ashtray. You don't have that choice. At the hospital, a nurse cleaned Nolan's wounds. In the bar, he ignored Candy. I may have hurt his head, but Candy shattered his pride. After he was bandaged, he stared at me. Are you really the biological daughter? No switch at birth. I was swapped, remember? Right. He paused, then asked, can it happen again? After the nurse finished, I looked at him seriously. Nolan, do you want to live always needing a handout? What do you mean? I looked at him like he was clueless. You know you're just a pawn for marriage alliances, right? Your sister-in-law is just a regular person. With our engagement, You can fight for what's yours. I'll back you with my family's shares. Don't you want more than to always be the second son? With every word, Nolan looked darker and more intense. Why help? I patted his face, because Lucy won't marry a loser. On the ride home, Nolan was silent. Shortly after arriving, a friend request popped up on my phone. Hello, fiancé. Our engagement and acknowledgement party combined into one grand event at the most well-known estate. Dad introduced me to guests as the party marked our family's official collaboration. Once Nolan finished his duties, he stuck by my side. His head injury had healed, and he wore a perfectly tailored suit, hair neatly styled, looking composed. Though he held a position in his family business, he never actually worked. Using this marriage alliance as an excuse, he asked his parents if he could go gain some experience at the subsidiary. His dad thought he had finally grown up and agreed without hesitation. His big bro David was the CEO. Rather than being all timid under David, it was better to call the shots at the subsidiary himself. We both agreed on that point. After meeting everyone with his dad, I finally let out a sigh of relief. There were so many people invited today, not just business partners, but also lots of media to hype up this alliance. Just as I started to relax, I saw Ken and Candy heading our way. No clue what those siblings were up to. I hadn't seen them before the banquet started. Dad sent people searching for them several times. Candy was wearing a dazzling red dress, outshining even me, the main character. She approached us, raised her glass, and gave Nolan a bittersweet smile. Nolan frowned slightly, but still clinked glasses with her. Suddenly, Candy started coughing. Ken quickly went to support her. Sis, are you okay? With your health like this, why did you even come? Candy shook her head and pushed Ken away. Ken, I'd regret it if I couldn't congratulate Nolan and Lucy in person. Her eyes turned red. If Candy wasn't in poor health, she wouldn't need to. A lot of people were attracted by the commotion on our side. Candy's frail figure and bitter words sparked many thoughts. There were whispers all around. No matter how long you raise them, blood ties matter more, huh? Sigh, they've really done enough. Who could treat an adopted daughter so well? In the end, blood is the most important thing. Not hearing what she wanted, Candy's face grew paler. While some young folks might find her pitiable and deserving sympathy, older businessmen thought it was only right to let a biological daughter return home. They weren't wrong. Blood ties are the most secure bond. Seeing Candy's pained face, Ken bit his lip. I noticed his hand press something in his pocket. Suddenly, the big screen behind the string quartet changed. A harsh, raspy woman's voice came blasting from the speakers. You unwanted brat, I'll beat you to death. Such a little princess, huh? Everyone come see, this is the real daughter of the business family. Look how they don't even want this brat. Even your own parents don't want you. Why do you even live? Damn it, all these years of free food. And still they don't want you. But today, I'd rather beat you to death. The sudden outburst attracted everyone's attention at the venue. On the big screen, a plump middle-aged woman was hitting a girl who looked about 15 or 16. The video quality was poor, as if it was recorded years ago. The woman kept swinging until the girl's face was covered in blood. Suddenly, she seemed unsatisfied and started tearing at the girl's clothes like a madwoman. A thin t-shirt ripped easily in her hands, the torn clothes revealing blue and purple bruises on the girl's body. If no one wants you, go with someone else. As if I'd let you come back to lure my husband. Who wants you? Take her away. The middle-aged woman pulled the girl up by her hair, showing a face smeared with blood. It was my exact face. The crowd gasped, their eyes darting between me and the screen. The footage was from the summer I turned 16. Wendy really wanted to see Candy, and took me along. Once we were there, Mom cut off all contact the moment she heard. It was a huge city, and Wendy couldn't find the address without help. She thought the city surely had ears to the ground, so she publicly beat me on the street to force out family. At first, it was just to compel family to show, but after 3 days of spending money and no results, her patience snapped. She blamed it all on me, truly intent on beating me to death. The video ended, leaving the venue in complete silence. Old wounds were ripped open in front of everyone. Sympathetic or mocking eyes fell on me. Candy looked at Nolan with tears in her eyes. Nolan, I can't bear you being deceived. Lucy didn't tell you she's got some disabilities. Her right ear can't hear. Slap. My mother suddenly stepped forward and slapped Candy. The child she'd raised so preciously had never been hit by her before. Candy looked at her in disbelief. Mom, you hit me? Mom was already in tears. Her body trembled. Don't call me Mom. With that said, she hugged me, breaking down in tears. How could they have treated you like this? How could they? It's Mom's fault. I'm sorry, Lucy. Your dad and I are so sorry. My dad turned around to wipe his tears. I stood numbly in her embrace. It's too late now. It's really too late. I stopped needing their love a long time ago. If only they'd paid some attention to me back then. They couldn't have overlooked my situation. Mom's emotional breakdown halted the banquet. Ken had uploaded the video to the computer, as seen from the venue's surveillance. In the living room, Ken and Candy stood before my dad and me. I asked Ken, did you watch that video? He stiffened, so what if I did? Bang! Dad exploded in anger, hitting Ken hard with a ruler. So what? Do you even use your brain? I know you don't like your sister, but she's your biological sister, a family member. It was her homecoming and engagement party, one of the most important days since she returned. Do you know how many eyes were on her? It's not just one person's reputation, it's the whole family's. Ken, you're an adult now. Doing something so stupid. I'm truly disappointed in you. Apologize to your sister. Ken pursed his lips, refusing to speak. Candy quickly stepped in front of Ken. Dad, don't blame Ken, it's all my fault. But before Candy could finish, Dad roared, apologize. Candy flinched in fear. Ken bit his lip and reluctantly said, sis. In the end, Dad docked Ken's allowance for 6 months. From beginning to end, Dad didn't say a word to Candy. In the study, Dad and I discussed how to handle the PR at the dinner party. I didn't mind and just smiled. Instead of suppressing, let's use it to our advantage. I'm the victim here. I did nothing wrong. Let's make a buzz. He nodded, satisfied. Dad's a businessman. In every situation, profits always come first for him. After finalizing the media strategy, his gaze landed on my ear. But before he could say anything, I spoke up. Dad, it's time to fulfill your promise about the shares. He stared at me for a while without speaking. As I was leaving with the share transfer agreement, Dad stopped me. Can your ear still be treated? The doctor said it's permanent hearing loss. Just before the door closed, I heard Dad sigh. Outside, I found Mom, eyes red from crying. She looked at me cautiously, tears falling before she could speak. I nodded at her and went to the 4th floor. Deep down, I've always wanted my parents around the most. I've read many stories about the real and fake daughters. But in none of them did the real daughter not get brought back home. The next day, my name shot to the top 10 searches. My life for the past 25 years was dug up entirely. Netizens humorously called me the most unfortunate, yet inspiring real daughter. Supporting me naturally pushed Candy down. Her past 25 years were also unearthed, filled with luxury goods, fancy cars, and world travels. For a while, phrases like parrot occupying the nest flooded her social media. Marketing accounts blew it up further, which I knew Dad allowed. At the same time, I joined the company. That share transfer agreement wasn't even presented. Dad only transferred 0.3% of the shares. I'm still too young. Without some achievements, even if he gave me all the shares, I wouldn't hold my ground in the company. Many in the company thought I was just there for show. But soon they realized they were wrong. With this family connection, I handled all collaborations with David. In several negotiations, David didn't gain any advantage. In just half a year, I secured contracts 40% higher than last year's for the company. During this time, I practically lived at the company, rarely going home. Mom brought me lunch for 2 months, then stopped coming. Looking at the calendar, I realized it was the Little New Year. Mom had called me in the morning to ask if I was coming home, a message I hadn't yet replied to. After some thought, I put on my coat and left the company. The villa was brightly lit. As soon as I parked, I heard laughter from inside. In the dining room, Mom and Candy were making dumplings. Dad and Ken were helping out. The tension from that dinner party seemed to have vanished. My arrival created a slight unease in their happy atmosphere. Seeing this, Dad got up. You came back at the right time. Come to the study with me. Since joining the company, my relationship with Dad has been strictly professional. He's pleased with me as an employee, and I don't bring up family matters with him. This arrangement works fine for us. He called me to the study to discuss the listing plan I proposed at today's shareholders meeting. As an old established company, we've long qualified to be listed. Over the years, competitors have gone public and then bankrupt, but we've remained cautious. In the study, Dad's face was dark with anger. Everything on the table had been swept to the floor. We just had a fierce argument. I pointed out his outdated and cowardly ways. I spoke plainly what no one dared to mention all these years. But clearly, Dad wasn't someone who could take advice. His rage was proof of his helplessness. He's old, lacking the energy for big changes. But I'm not. Leaving the study, I sat expressionless at the dining table. All the servants were off today. Mom and Candy brought out the dishes. Ken kept sneaking glances at me, awkwardly saying, "You've been working hard lately, haven't you?" I replied indifferently, "It's all right." He pulled out a small box from behind him. "It was your birthday last weekend." Looking at the little velvet box, I was stunned. I've never celebrated my birthday. It's the day my life's mistakes began. But I accepted it anyway. "Thanks." Seeing me take it, Ken got a bit excited. "Just so you know, Mom and Sis also got you birthday gifts." When Mom and Candy came back with the dumplings, Ken quickly sat properly, as if nothing had happened. Dad glanced at him, giving a light grunt. They placed the dumplings down and went to the cabinet to fetch 2 shopping bags. Mom handed me an orange shopping bag. Inside was a 7-figure priced handbag. "Lucy, it's your first birthday back home. I hope you'll stay safe and healthy. I'll be with you for every birthday from now on." A bittersweet feeling rose in my heart, and I thanked her with a slight smile. Lucy gave me a pink box. Its outer package didn't hint at what was inside. Ken couldn't help but reach over to open it. The words hearing aid were printed big on the box. Ken frowned. "Sis, why'd you get this?" Candy playfully stuck out her tongue. "You guys gave all those fancy things, so I went practical." "Lucy, I researched this hearing aid. With it, you won't feel any different from a normal person." I took the hearing aid from Ken's hand. It was pink, custom looking. After all, regular hearing aids don't have words engraved on them. Possibly sure I wouldn't confront her then and there. Candy gave me a sly smile. "This color suits you. Try it on." Candy was reminding me that even now, standing here confident and polished, the past couldn't be erased. I gave a small smile. I threw the hearing aid and box right at her face. Why should I have to take her crap? Ah. Candy covered her face. Mom rushed over to check on her. "Lucy, even if you don't like it, you can't hit Candy." I squinted my eyes and questioned Candy. "What does the engraving mean?" Ken picked up the hearing aid and sure enough, saw the tiny words on it. His expression changed. "Sis, did you engrave it wrong?" "No, that's her name, right?" "Sis, what are you talking about?" Candy raised her head, her eyes glaring at me like they were poisoned. "Did I say anything wrong? Why would you, a country girl, go to college? Why are you better than me? Why didn't Wendy make you deaf in both ears?" It was beyond awkward. Candy's face twisted with madness. Neither my mother's attempts to stop her nor anything else could prevent what happened next. My dad couldn't help but slap her. Suddenly, the dining room was filled with my mom's sobs and Candy's wild laughter. I pressed my lips together and grabbed my coat. I wasn't interested in watching this drama unfold. Unexpectedly, when I reached the entrance, my mom chased after me. She tried to explain for Candy. "It's just that Candy is sick. She's been anxious these years, afraid that you'll come back and take her place. She's just really scared of losing us." "Lucy, don't blame her." I couldn't help but laugh. Even now, they're asking me not to blame her. All my pent-up emotions finally burst out. I stared into my mom's eyes. "She's scared of losing you guys, but what about me? What about me? Do you know what I went through? Because she was scared of losing you. I've permanently lost hearing in my left ear, broken 8 ribs, and see my nose? It took 3 surgeries to straighten it. Do you know what it's like to hope and be disappointed over and over? To not dare blink for fear of missing you? To dream of your parents coming to save you? You don't know. 10 years. 10 whole years because of her. Because of you. I wished I were dead every day." My mom just stared at me stunned. Dad and Ken, who had followed us out, were the same. They'd never seen me like this. I was supposed to be indifferent, uncaring, not hysterical. I wiped the tears from my face and suddenly laughed. Turns out the things buried deep inside never really go away. I finally admitted it to myself. I hate them, and I will never, ever forgive them. After leaving the house, I found Nolan's car parked outside. Somehow, it had started snowing. Nolan stood dumbfounded in the snow. When he saw me, he didn't ask anything. He just asked if I wanted to go to his place for some dumplings. Our company was about to go public. There were two camps, those for, and those against it, due to the risks involved. Tensions between the newcomers and the old guard were running high. Finally, my dad made the call. We were going public. Nolan's side made swift progress too. His family operates differently from mine. David took charge early and got full support. But after ruling for so long, opposition was inevitable. These dissenters became Nolan's targets to win over. Right now, the two families' joint business and tourism complex was already underway. The first phase's contract was signed. This project was crucial, especially for me to secure my position. I worked on the public listing, while also helping Nolan get involved in the company. Nolan trusted me a lot. I advised him on many projects and plans. Gradually, my late nights at the office turned from solo sessions into shared ones with him. A year later, the second phase of the business complex commenced. But Nolan ran into trouble. At a hotel owned by his family, I spent a night in the lobby. An important meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., and Nolan had to be there. At 8:10, Nolan rushed downstairs, clothes crumpled. Seeing me, he awkwardly adjusted his collar to hide love bites. Lucy, he started. Before he could finish, I handed him a suit. Change into this. Then I called someone to deal with the girl upstairs. Nolan hung his head like a kid caught doing something wrong. Sorry. I didn't say a word, just went home that day. Since last year's Lunar New Year, I hadn't been back. Ken was traveling abroad. Mom was staying at a nursing home with Candy. Dad was the only one at home. I prepared 2 documents. One was an equity transfer agreement that I slid towards him. Dad, with the company going public, I need these shares. Our family needs absolute control. He didn't move, so I pushed another document forward. This was a family trust fund I had established. You really think Ken's temperament and ability suit running a company, Dad? I pressed, looking him in the eye. I can let him pursue what he loves, and guarantee he and his descendants a worry-free life. His eyes were filled with shock. I was asking him to give me all the shares despite the deep-seated patriarchal values. After a long pause, he burst out laughing. That's my daughter. After that, I became the majority shareholder. As the public listing loomed, I got busier. I kept turning Nolan away. A few weeks later, I took the company public. The entire company halted operations, thousands cheering for me. From its founding until now, only I, Lucy, had received this honor. I took a short break post-listing. When I returned, it was time to sign the contract for the third phase of the business complex. When the company was about to go public, I couldn't afford any mishaps, so I hadn't dealt with Nolan yet. Now it was time to settle things. I compiled all of Nolan's scandals and the shady dealings within the company he was involved in. Nobody knew better than I did what he had been up to. David, sitting across from me at the negotiation table, frowned. I held up a USB drive and smiled. This list? All of Nolan's people. Pull out of the third phase, and it's yours. My marriage with Nolan was successfully annulled. That night, Nolan stormed into my office. He angrily demanded, Lucy, did you ever truly care? I slapped him. Looking at him with disdain, I mocked, you? You think you deserve my heart? Someone like me, how could I want love and redemption from anyone else? Nolan's done for. He won't have any real power anymore. Just a washed-up family member. But why should any of this matter to me? A year after the company went public, Candy killed herself. Her state had been unstable since the last time I saw her. I heard that Wendy and Mike met her the day before she took her own life. I didn't go to the funeral. Mom was drowning in grief, and after the service, Dad took her abroad. Ken decided to study overseas after graduating from college. When the dust settled, I gathered evidence and sued Wendy and Mike for the harm they did to me. Even after all these years, old teachers and neighbors were willing to testify for me. In the end, they paid the price. From the little girl who couldn't leave Liangshan, I stepped up to a place of admiration. What didn't kill me only made me stronger. The end. Bonus, Nolan's perspective. That time felt like a dream. For the first time in years, I tasted the power. All because of Lucy, the true gem from the countryside. People went from calling me the second son to CEO. I was no longer in my brother's shadow. Even my usually indifferent parents started to care about me, asking how I was doing. I began to enjoy the joy that power brought. I spent less time with my old crew. Lucy was amazing. Her determination and pride captivated me. It was the first time I thought arranged marriage wasn't bad. But she was too proud. I faced setbacks and I needed comfort. She would just tell me to calm down, and like a machine help me review. I needed more than an advisor. I wanted a real girlfriend. So, I went to the bar. I couldn't even remember the last time I had whiskey and cigars. Lucy didn't like these smells. Out of spite, I smoked and drank nonstop. I didn't think I was drunk. A friend introduced his sister to me, and she sat beside me. I heard she was a college student. Her voice was gentle, softly persuading me to drink less. I unloaded all my worries on her. She patted my head, saying, "Nolan, you're already amazing." I don't know how we ended up in a hotel, but I remember her flattering me, being vulnerable and encouraging me. She was different from Lucy. When I sobered up the next day, I realized what I'd done. I panicked. Lucy doesn't tolerate betrayal. What if she found out? Would she be disappointed, call off the engagement? But soon I knew. She wouldn't. She sat in the hotel lobby and didn't say a word when she saw me. She just sent someone to deal with the girl upstairs. She knew what I did. She pulled me into a meeting like usual, showing no care. But I saw that her usually impeccable clothes had a crease. She didn't break things off, saving my face. Naively, I thought she loved me, forgiving me because of love. I regretted it, wanted to make it right with her. But I never saw her again. I waited for the company to go public, waited for her to return from a trip. But all I got was the news that our engagement was over. She was ruthless. She left all my plans to my brother. I wanted to ask if she ever truly loved me, but I couldn't. Words turned into harshness instead. She said I wasn't worthy of her love. Back to being the Nolan from the clubs. My parents never gave me power again. Half a year later, I got engaged another time. To a mall executive's youngest daughter. Just another family pawn like me. She was spoiled, less clever. She wasn't even close to Lucy. But I had to marry her. Countless times I imagined if I hadn't cheated, would Lucy and I be married? But there is no if. We always fought after marriage. 2 years later, at a dinner party, I saw Lucy again. She was still stunning. As if her presence made everyone else insignificant. Joking and mingling with influential people at the event. And Lucy's glass was raised above them all. The end.